Hello. Today is June the 11th, 2013. The Heritage Museum of Montgomery County will be interviewing Gertie Spencer, and my name is Sally Copley, the director of the museum. Hi, Gertie.
Hi, how are you today?
Fine, thank you. Where were you born, Gertie?
I was born here in Conroe and at the Mary Swain Sanitarium. It was before our county had a hospital or hospitals, and it was located about 3 blocks east of the railroad track on Davis Street.
When did your family come to Montgomery County?
My daddy's people came here, my great-grandparents came here in the early 1840s, and they settled in a little community, now it's a ghost town. It's Danville, which is a little bit northwest of Willis. And he was, great-granddaddy Sam was a farmer, and they lived there for a number of years with their children, and then later, I know my granddaddy was in his teens when they moved out close to Montgomery, and right across where April Sound is located is where my great-grandparents built their home. And they farmed. They raised a lot of cotton, and then they raised the feed crops for their animals. And they had a large acreage that they accumulated over the years. But each one of Granddaddy's brothers, when they married, great-granddaddy gave them a parcel of land to start their farming life.
So basically the occupation of your ancestors was farming and...
Yeah, subsistence farming. They did everything. I mean, you know, they had their food and they built their houses and right on the land and used everything, just like everybody else did it during that period of time.
Well, tell me a little bit about your father and your mother.
Okay. My daddy was the middle child of the 6th child of my grandparents, and he grew up here, of course, and my mother was not from this area at all. She came from the San Antonio area, and her brother had married Dr. Waters' daughter, and they had resided in Montgomery. So one summer, when she was about 19 years old, she came to visit her brother in Montgomery and met my daddy, and they just fell in love right when they met, and they married and lived locally. My daddy was an automobile dealer, and Mama was a stay-at-home mother, and she was a real fun mother. She played with us and did all kind of things and told us stories about little animals, and we laid on the blankets in the backyard in the hot summer days under a shade tree, and we'd look up at the clouds and we would find things in the clouds. So that's the kind of mom I had.
I remember your mother. She was a very sweet lady. Where did you live growing up?
We lived on Austin Street, and it was the most northern street on the west side of Fraser Street. And there were 4 streets in that little subdivision, and we weren't allowed to cross Fraser. At that time, it was Highway 75, and it was the main highway from Houston to Dallas. But every once in a while, we'd slip across there. But and then when we walked to school, and they finally put a red light there at Lewis Street and Fraser, and we had a retired I don't know if he was a sheriff or JP, but he was a retired man, and he would help the children cross the highway.
Well, tell us a little bit about the schools.
Well, Conroe School District, which I'm most familiar with, had 3 buildings here in Conroe, and then they had a couple of rural schools. I know they had Stephen F. Austin out east of Cut and Shoot area, and then maybe another one or so out in the, but Sam Houston Elementary was built in the early 1930s, and that's where I went to school for the elementary age or grades. And then the junior high was built on the east side of the railroad track on Lewis Street. And junior high was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And when we got to be, my class, we got to be 9th graders, we thought we were going to be the big dogs in school. Well, not so. You know how important football is in Texas and I guess all over the United States. And they wanted to raise the, we were like 2 or 3A to 4A. And we didn't have enough students in the high school, so we never did get to be the oldest class in junior high. We moved over to high school, and the Conroe High School was on Thompson Street, and that's where the football stadium and band hall and all of that was located.
Was it Davy Crockett? Was that the name?
It was. It was Davy Crockett and Travis Junior High, and then Sam Houston. And we had so many children that were bused in. Conroe wasn't very large at that time, but the oil boom started in the early 30s, and all of the oil camps, Exxon, which was Humble, had 3 camps, and Shell Oil had a couple, and gosh, Amoco and Tidewater, all of those children were bused into the schools.
Did you tell me, or could you tell me a little bit about Booker T? I mean,
yeah, we were very much segregated, and the Booker T High School was really all 3 schools in one. It was, you know, from 1st grade through 12th, and it was located over in the black community in Dugan. And they're the only ones that are ever state champions in football was their team. And they had a really wonderful band, and when we had parades in Conroe, they outshined the other bands.
Well, tell me or tell us a little bit about your playtime as a child.
Well, it's so different. You know, we didn't have television, and we didn't have air conditioning, so during the hot part of the day, Mama made us rest or stay in the shade for a while. And other than that, we were on our bicycles riding, and we played. In fact, where the museum is located was the forest or the woods behind our house, and we played on this area. And the creek, the Alligator Creek, we would wade in that, and we had tree houses. And I had brothers. I was between 2 brothers, Lewis and John, and I played as hard as the boys did.
Tomboy, huh?
Well, yeah. And we played hide and seek on these 4 blocks, 4 streets, and in the late afternoon we'd get on our bicycles, and whoever was it would have to come find us, and it was a lot of fun. We had skating rinks that would come, or a skating rink that would come annually, and they would locate out on East Davis, and we could go out there and skate for a nominal fee. And then the movies, we had 2 theaters. Crichton Theater had first-run movies at the time, and then Liberty Theater across the street from the Crichton had B class movies, and a lot of them were serials. And one week you'd go and the hero would be in a fix, and next week you'd have to go to see if he was going to, you know, succeed. And the swimming pool was a delight. The Conroe School District built a wonderful swimming pool with a recreation building adjoining it. And in the afternoon, we could, for 9 cents, go at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We'd all line up and couldn't wait to get in the water. And it would be so hot, the ice house would come and bring 300-pound blocks of ice and put in it to cool the water down, because there was no shade at all there. But we would swim, and in fact, the school district owned that swimming pool, and then they had swimming instructions for the children that were in elementary school. And the lifeguards during the summer were the athletic coaches of junior high and high school. And so it was a safe place to go. And we would walk over to the swimming pool, and then Tiny Earthman had a little trailer house with a concession stand, and she'd make hamburgers and hot dogs, and if we were lucky enough, we could have one of those before we left.
I remember her. What about, you were talking about your grandparents, y'all would go to the farm and some of the games you would play there.
And the things I'm telling you, I wasn't an exception. Children, all children lived and did things that my brothers and I did. My grandparents would allow us to come and stay. Well, Grandma only wanted the girls to come together and then the boys together. We never did get to go with. She said that way it was less trouble for her.
That's true.
And we would ride horses, and we'd play in the barns, and they had cottonseed bins, and they were tall and full of cottonseed, and we would climb up in the rafters and jump down in that cottonseed. And we, Granddaddy had built a water tower so they could have running water in their house, and it was on a tower. And it was made out of wood, and then the pipes were galvanized pipes, and you couldn't slide on them too good, so we'd get wax paper from Grandmama, and the boys and I would climb up there, and we'd go zoop, and then we'd climb up, and that was, really adventurous.
Yeah. Now, when and who did you marry?
I married Gertie Spencer, and last week we celebrated our 61st wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Right. It's a long time.
He's a sweet guy.
He is. And we were lucky that we married so young and it lasted. He and I were high school sweethearts, and I met him through my older brother. They had played football together, and he'd come by the house with Bubba. And of course, I was the little sister, and Bubba didn't want me around, so I didn't see what they talked about or what they did.
Yeah.
But anyway, we married, and he went to Rice University, and we lived in Houston for a while after we married. And then his first territory was down around Corpus, and that was the first time I'd ever moved. I'd lived in one house. I was raised there, and we moved to Corpus, and we're down there for a couple of years, and our third child was born there. And then he was promoted and back in the main office in Houston, and then we moved back to Conroe. And it was, I guess in maybe 1965, we moved back to Conroe. The only highway was still Highway 75, 2 lanes, slow. If you got behind a slow car, it took you forever to get, where you wanted to go. But we moved back, and when our kids were in school, we bought a house in south of town, and it was almost close enough to where I was raised in the woods, because it was a new subdivision, and we were the 7th family to move out there, so they got a little freedom with riding their bikes and playing out in the forest.
Now, you said you had how many children?
We have 3.
And they are?
Randy is our eldest, and Jamie Ann is our daughter, and then Blake is our younger son. Gosh, they're almost getting to be 60 years old.
That happens.
We got 4 grandchildren, and we got 5 great-grandchildren, and thank goodness they're all close enough for us to visit
And healthy.
Yeah.
That's good. Now, when you moved back, I know that you went to work for a bank in town.
Yeah, when Blake finally got into school, when he got old enough to go to school, James never wanted me to work when the kids were at home. So they made a new position at the bank, and I was fortunate enough that they chose to do their marketing. And gosh, at this time, Our county was first and second in growth in the United States, first and second in the growth of the whole country.
Wow.
The major oil companies were consolidating their offices, and they were moving them to Houston. And of course, a lot of people wanted to come up in the forest and live in a smaller town to raise their families. And I called on these people. Before they got here, the realtors were kind enough to give me names of people that would buy property or homes. And then I'd contact them. And I did it by myself for a long time, and then I got a real good partner. Sally and I worked together.
We had a great time, didn't
Sally
we?
and I worked together, what, 12 years?
Yeah, 12.
And it was a fun job. It was a physical job. We were in the car, we were driving and getting out and back and forth in the summertime. It was difficult, but it was real rewarding. And I worked for the bank for 20 years. Our bank that I was employed by started out as a little small independent bank, and then they helped form a, what do you call them?
Holding
company.
Yeah, that's right.
And when they did that, we got to be more sophisticated, I guess. And then the bank sold several times, and then they, after that 20 years that I worked there, at the end of that, they wanted to get new personnel for their marketing. And they let all the marketing officers retire.
And then when you retired, what did you do?
A friend of mine who owned a travel agency asked me if I would buy part of her business. And I said, gosh, I don't know anything about the travel industry, but let me work for you now, let me see. So I worked there for a couple of years, and then I became really involved with the development of this museum, and that became my passion. And I was on the board for, I guess, when we formed our museum. And then we had several short-term directors, and then I became the director and had the opportunity to help create the exhibits and learn more and more about the history of our county. The first settlers that came here were from the southern states of the United States, and all of them came, a lot of them came to get the land grants, the free land, and they were, the main industry was cotton farming, and then of course with being in the forest, logging and sawmilling became second industry that developed.
Well, you mentioned to me that when you were director of the museum, one of your old-time friends at the bank came and
yeah, she was the
worked with
brains.
you.
I was the brawn. She was the brains. I did a lot of the moving the things around and doing the exhibits, and then she did the bookkeeping. And Angie Walker was a delight to work with. We lost her last year, but she and I worked together for a long time, and she kept the records and was on our board, and we enjoyed working together.
She was the sweet lady.
Right.
You mentioned to me that you were a foster parent. Can you tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that?
After James and I retired, we had rental property, and I went over to a neighborhood to see about an occupant over there, and saw a little family there that needed help desperately. The young woman had 3 young girls and 2 grandbabies, and they were just destitute. So I asked if they would like to move into one of our rent houses and not have to pay rent. And then I went to some community event, and one of the local judges talked to me, and he said, Gertie, we need foster parents so desperately. And James and I had wanted to do something after we retired um, we've been so blessed, and we wanted to do something back to the community, and we became foster parents, and it was a kind of a bittersweet experience, but we did it for a number of years, and we were in our 60s, so James's health was deteriorating, and we didn't continue to be foster parents.
Now, I know you're active in your church. Tell us a little bit about your church.
Well, James and I, when we married, he was raised by, his grandfather was a Baptist minister, and my family was Presbyterian, so when we first married, we went to a community church in Houston where we lived at that time. And then when we went to Corpus, I told him I really wanted to go to the Presbyterian church, so I twisted his arm and he started going. And over the years, gosh, I taught Sunday school, and James and I both were deacons and elders at the church and raised our children in our church.
And your youngest son, Blake.
Yeah, he's a Presbyterian minister. He said he wanted to do that so we could straighten our family out.
I guess the question would be, did he? I'm
Yes,
sure he did.
I don't know if he succeeded or not, but he tried.
I've known you for over 40 years, and as long as I've known you, you've been very involved in your community. Tell us a little bit about what you've done.
Well, back to our job, our marketing jobs. The bank wanted us to be involved, so gosh, we were in the Chamber of Commerce, and I helped start the emergency assistance with some other people, and scouting, and I don't know, but they wanted us to be in the community and visible for the bank, and I had that opportunity to do that.
And it was a lot of fun.
It was.
Had big times. Tell us about the corner gas stores.
Well,
Grocery stores.
Yeah, most areas of the town had a corner grocery, a mom and pop grocery store. Mm-hmm. And downtown Conroe was the only marketing place that you went for anything, drugs or pharmaceutical drugs. And the grocery stores were located downtown. So these little grocery stores, little corner stores, were in neighborhoods, and the kids would, the mamas and daddies would buy things too, but it was a delight for children. We'd go down and have us a popsicle or a bag of peanuts and a grapette. Remember a grapette?
A dreamsicle. Yeah. What were some of the names of those grocery stores?
Well, Dolly Hines and her husband had a grocery store on the corner of McCall and Fraser. And then on the street I lived on, Austin and Fraser, the Porter. It was just usually the name of the family that operated it. Yeah. And then they had, I remember one over by the old hospital on First Street. They had a little corner grocery store when I'd go play with a girlfriend over there. Okay. So now we have the C-stores that are open, almost all the time. Well, these little stores didn't stay open, but, just during the daytime.
Well, you mentioned your girlfriends. Who were some of your local friends that you went to school with and played with?
Oh, gosh. Dot Edgar, Laura Beth, Lancaster, Marcella Porter, and all of those. A couple of them still live here, but
good.
Most of them have relocated to other communities.
Good. Tell us a little bit about the oil field influences.
Oh, yeah. Oil was discovered here in 1931, and men had been searching for oil since 1900, maybe 15 or so, and they just hadn't drilled deep enough. And a young man, George Strait came to the area, and he was successful and got oil with his first well in 1931. Well, it wasn't a great of crude, so all the old timers had been searching, said, oh, we knew, you know. But he was successful the next year and got a good sweet crude, and the race was on. Conroe had 3,000 people, and within 6 weeks, 15,000 men had come here looking for jobs. It was during the Depression, and we didn't have enough rooms or places for them to live. We didn't have enough restaurants, and families would put all the children in one bedroom and then rent out a couple of bedrooms. Homemakers would make lunches for them, but the oil field was developed into the third largest oil field at that time in the United States. Bakerfield, California. Well, East Texas, up by Kilgore and Tyler was the largest, and then Bakersfield, and then Conroe was the third producing. And now it's all automated, and the people that once lived out there, there were hundreds of families that lived in the oil field. And like I said earlier, the boys and girls were bused into to the schools, and now they're all vacant. I mean,
Amazing. Tell us a little bit about the railroads and how they changed.
well, it changed, but I want to say the oil field probably changed our county more than any one thing did. The farmers would be 2 days going down to Houston to take their cotton, or loggers were taking their lumber or logs, and then 2 days back. So it was a 4-day round trip. And then when the railroads came, they could put their production on the train, and it would get there in a couple of hours.
Wow.
So all of the people started moving toward the railroad. And the little town that our great-grandparents lived in when they first came here, Danville, was not located on the railroad. So a new town, Willis, developed, and these people moved from Danville over to the railroad. And Willis became larger than the first oldest town in the county. And then Conroe didn't develop until the late, maybe 1892 or so, like that. And we were at a crossroads, so we developed really more than the other communities.
How many would you say lived in Danville?
Oh, I don't know what the population was. It was probably fewer than 1,000.
And were you responsible for the marker for Danville? I know they have a...
No, that was before.
Okay.
I chaired the Historical Commission for 25 years, but the commission was developed, the Historical Commission developed in, I think, 1955, and it was to mark historical places and things and help preserve them. And I'm still involved, but I don't chair it anymore.
Okay. Would you tell us, let's get back to the 70s and talk about the growth in the county.
Okay. Well, at the same time the oil companies were bringing people to the Houston area, Lake Conroe was being developed. And a lot of the people from the Houston area had weekend places on creeks and small lakes and out in the forest. And some of those built houses and lived permanently. And then it finally, when it was completed, and it took them 20 years to complete the lake, they completely cleared all of the forest, all of the timber, and all of the underbrush, and procured the land from the farmers, and that was our main farming area. And so once they finished the dam and they decided to have a big celebration, the developer said, the engineer said, it'll take 3 years for this to fill up. Well, we had a monsoon season and it filled up in 7 or 8 months.
I remember.
And April Sound was one of the first resort area or residential resort. And that was on the Weisinger property. My grandfather and his brothers farmed right in the same area. And when the water came in, they had collectively, with the three families, had 7 miles waterfront, but they didn't have their farms anymore.
Bless their hearts. Well, and you were telling me that at one time that area was named after your grandparents, right?
Well,
So how does that?
Riles. My grandmother main name was Riles, and Granddaddy opened and operated a little general store.
Uh-huh.
And the U.S. government asked if they could put a post office there, and they didn't want to name it Weisinger, it was too long.
Oh.
So Granddaddy said, well, name it from my wife's maiden name, and it was Riles there for, maybe, I don't know how many years. It was closed down by maybe 15 or 18.
Wow. Well, I know that you would like to introduce our videographer, Sam Cable, because you guys are related. Could you?
Our great-grandfather was named Samuel Weisinger, and Sam Cable is my cousin, and we are connected through our great-grandparents. And his mother and my daddy were first cousins, and they were raised as next-door neighbors, and I'm not saying there's maybe a fourth of a mile between the houses, but my daddy's family had, like I said, 11 children, and his grandparents had 14, and then there was another brother that had 5 or 6, so their kids were just all over everywhere.
Prolific, huh? Well, Gertie, we appreciate your interview for the Heritage Museum Oral History Project. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I'm honored that you chose me to share my memories, and
we love it. We are so honored to have you.
I love it too, and I hope everybody will come visit the museum. They're open Wednesday through Saturday, and we have a wonderful summer program for children that learn to
do things like the pioneers did back in the day.
churn butter and wash on a rub board
Saw
and
logs.
saw logs and everything.
Yeah.
So anyway, y'all come see us.
Thank you, Gertie. Thank you.